Life's full of big money decisions. Dividend versus growth stocks, tapping home equity, even navigating tariffs.
And for every smart tip out there, there's another one that sounds smart but isn't.
That's where NerdWallet's Smart Money Podcast comes in. I'm Sean Piles, a certified financial planner professional.
And I'm Elizabeth Ayola. On NerdWallet's Smart Money Podcast, our finance journalists do the homework so you can make confident wealth-building moves.
Whether you're building your portfolio or protecting it, we've got the facts and a little fun along the way.
Follow NerdWallet's Smart Money Podcast on your favorite podcast app.
Hello, True Spies listeners. Welcome back to True Spies Debrief. Here on the Debrief, we catch up with some of our favourite guests from the True Spies archive for a deeper look at the themes, events and insights that fascinate them. Tracy Walder, who you met in episode 6 of True Spies, is the rare individual to have served both in the CIA and the FBI. But in her book and online, Tracy has been outspoken about the harassment she experienced at the FBI, which ultimately led her to part ways with her career in counterterrorism. True Spies producer Morgan Childs caught up with Tracy to speak with her about being a woman in 2 American intelligence agencies, her subsequent work as a high school teacher, and her decision to use her online presence as a platform to empower men and women with an interest in foreign affairs.
Tracy, hi. Thank you for being back here again. I want to start with a particularly striking moment in your book. You noted early on that you gave a smile to a known terrorist. And I'm going to read from the book. You write, "As had been trained in me since childhood, I smiled. This is how I've always greeted people, and it didn't occur to me to stop that smile for a terrorist." That line rang really true for me, and it seems like whether you're a CIA officer or an FBI agent or a teacher or a podcast producer, you receive training as a woman that isn't always true for men who are doing the same work. And so my first question for you is, I wonder, looking back on your career, if you feel that being trained to smile served you or helped you to do your job.
Well, first, thanks so much for having me, Morgan. I've done a lot of unpacking on the smile because I still do. And I have to be honest, now that I do the news and just like public stuff, I get a lot of like hate comments about my appearance and the way that I present myself, I guess, which is fine. I'm old. I don't care what people think. But in terms of the smile, the unpacking that I've done actually about that is it's actually a coping mechanism. So I think growing up, I was bullied horrifically, lived in a pretty strict household. And I was just taught to get over it and move on, get over it and move on, get over it and move on, get over it and move on. And so I just started being happy all the time, even though I probably wasn't happy all the time, and I'm still not. But it's an inappropriate, immature response to trauma and to sort of cataclysmic events happening, if you will. And so it's actually not something that I did on purpose. It's actually a trauma response. That's what I've learned about it. And a lot of times people will catch me smiling when I'm talking about certain issues more so than others, because that's how my brain is like calming it down, if that makes any sense, so that I don't overreact or get upset or anything like that, because it was always trained into me to not. And so I think the same thing rings true with, if you're coming face to face with a terrorist, that's very traumatic, obviously, for anyone, male, female, whatever. But I think because that was like my trauma response is probably what I did. But looking back on it, it probably helped me in terms of either disarming people, right? Or catching people so off guard with a different kind of personality than what I think they probably expected, that sometimes they let their guard down and it helps me get the information that I need. So I think it worked probably to my benefit, although it's actually something that I am currently working through to stop doing, quite frankly.
I'd like to ask you a sort of more difficult question about the FBI and what you went through there. And you've used the word trauma to describe what you endured. And the first thing I want to say is that I'm sorry and please don't answer this question if you feel uncomfortable. But I'm really curious to know whether you and people like you who've served the FBI receive the kind of psychological support that they might need after serving or as a result of the work that they do?
So the trauma actually doesn't come from the FBI at all. The trauma actually all comes from CIA. And it doesn't come from any of the gender stuff. I'm really not that bothered, to be honest with you, about gender harassment. It doesn't, for some reason, it just doesn't impact me as much as it might impact other people. And that's okay. We all have our degree. No, my trauma comes from serving in war zones, dealing with terrorists, watching people die, being shot at. I mean, that's where my trauma comes from, to be completely honest with you.
I'm curious to know, first of all, how the agency responds to that sort of need. And I am curious as a woman and knowing other women, if there might be more support for people who serve if there are more women in these roles.
Totally. At CIA, obviously, I told you I had that trauma. So the problem is if you seek out, regular psychological treatment, therapy, first of all, they're not cleared, so they can't know what, you are dealing with. And then second of all, you can lose your security clearance, which is problematic, right? So we got all these different issues. I think for me, gosh, it was so bad. I had gone to Afghanistan, which is the only country I can say I've actually been to, with the one psychologist that was at CIA. And it was so bad for her, she had to leave. She couldn't deal with it. So that's how you know it's bad, right? And so they had a psychologist that clears you to be able to go into these situations, but no one that helps you when you get back. And so, right, like that's problematic. And so what happens is then you have people self-medicating in inappropriate ways and all the things. And so when we leave the CIA, whether we retire or we leave in good standing, just like anybody in the military, we are not considered veterans. Full stop. And so if we didn't retire, we don't get benefits. Whereas like someone who leaves the military but didn't retire but left honorably does get benefits, gets medical care, psychological care, whatever it is they need. Now, I'm lucky. I have a husband who has really great health insurance. I can afford mental health treatment because we can. Not everyone is in that situation. Not everyone is fortunate enough when they leave to be covered and all of that. And so one day I was upset. And so I, utilizing social media, I rage tweeted, it was called Twitter back then, but I rage tweeted my senator. I live in the state of Texas now. I'm from California, but I live in Texas. So I rage tweeted my senator, who is the head of the Intelligence Committee, and just like, why don't people have health? I mean, just not mean. I didn't curse at him or anything, but just not a nice tweet. And they called. He called. And he had no idea that we were not considered veterans, and no idea that we were not given like appropriate mental health care, like zero. He had no idea. And so I am happy to say that July 1st of 2023, which was the new fiscal year, a $10 million package that I worked with him on passing was approved for the CIA to set up an office of mental health awareness, and then to also benefit individuals who have left the agency and subsidize their mental health care. So yay, that happened. I'm really happy about that, quite frankly. But yeah, that's what rage tweeting your senator can get you.
That's what they mean by getting involved.
Yeah, I guess. Apparently so.
I think reading the book, I was thinking, well, she's trained to be nice. Like so many of us are trained to be nice. And I wonder, certainly that's also true for a lot of women. And I wonder, as somebody who's been through the FBI and the CIA, you also see, maybe the benefits and also the drawbacks of being a woman who performs niceness all the time.
Yeah. I think part of the problem on that, and this is such great questions. I love these questions because it really gets to the heart of why I do what I do. I do think a lot of how I was taught growing up was, don't make waves, get over things really quickly, just move on. I don't want to see you cry. I don't want to see you yell. I don't want to see any of that. And so that's just my personality. But I think we're okay with seeing women like that, right? Because women are supposed to be nice. We're supposed to be, right? There's all these stereotypes of what we're supposed to be. And so when I'm not, because I definitely not always nice. That's just the reality of the situation. And so when we're not, people become upset, really upset when I am not who they expected me to be, when I have an opinion, when I don't do what I'm being told to do, when I challenge people, or when I'm not nice. I actually feel like I run into a harder time with that than with men, because it's just not what's expected of us necessarily.
Completely understand. So I'd like to speak with you a little bit about the FBI. Could you just talk a little bit about, especially for people who haven't read your book, what you experienced there and whether or not maybe you believe that things have changed in the last 20 years?
I will back up to the CIA just really quickly to touch on that. I had nothing but a very positive experience there. But again, I can only speak from my own lived experience. I'm sure there's women that have had positive, negative, and I honor all of those. I think with the CIA, I had such a positive experience, had so many awards, so many friends. I expected the FBI to be exactly the same. So that was wrong. But again, we have to look at the jobs. CIA is the collection of intelligence. That's it. That's their job, right? In all different methods. FBI's job is law enforcement. So we have to go back and look at the history of that. So women could not be FBI agents until 1972. I was born in the 70s. That's like not that long ago. I know some people think that's ancient, but it really wasn't that long ago. And as of right now, about 17 to 19% of special agents at the FBI are female. And I think we associate law enforcement with masculine traits, right? So you've got like all these different things sort of like stacked against you. And the interesting thing is because of my experience at the FBI, I have to be honest, I felt a little like ashamed, like it was my fault, or, I think we as women do that sometimes. And so I actually was never going to put in the book that I worked at the FBI, which is so weird because like that's an accomplishment, right? But I was sent an email with a link to a New York Times article. This was in, I think, 2019-ish, somewhere around there. And it was a link to a 15-woman gender discrimination lawsuit against the FBI and how they were treated at Quantico. So to answer your question, I don't think anything has changed because I was not part of that lawsuit at all, but they wanted me just to see it and like know like what was going on there still. And so that's when I decided to put that I had worked there in my book. So I'm not sure that all that much has changed.
I mean, I maybe do want to flag for the listener, a lot has changed at the CIA relatively recently. It's like sort of surprisingly recently, and not just in terms of gender, but sexuality as well. I know that until 1995, case officers couldn't have security clearance if they were openly gay. And certainly, it's not a perfect place to work, just like nowhere is a perfect place to work if you're a woman in the States. I know that there's a trans CIA officer who goes by the name Jenny Hall, who said that her experience working while female meant working harder for less pay. And she's so funny. She said it was about being interrupted by men who think that they're giving a TED talk. Does that experience ring true to you?
No, not for me at CIA. Like I said, I had nothing but a very positive experience. I worked with many openly gay colleagues. But again, this was after 1995, obviously. And many different sexual preferences, cultures, all of that. I'm Jewish. I worked with Muslims. I worked with Buddhists. I worked with, the whole gamut. And no, I had all male bosses, and they were probably the best bosses I've ever had and treated me fantastically. And I learned a lot about leadership from them. So again, I think everyone has their own lived experience. So I'm certainly not here to tell someone they didn't live that, because they did. I just did it when I was there.
Also thinking about some of the skills that CIA officers need to learn. So many of them are sort of considered soft skills. And when it comes to the need to connect with assets and adversaries and understand who they are and what they might need, it makes me wonder why intelligence agencies like the CIA wouldn't seek out women in particular.
I think they do. I feel like I was sought out. And those are skills that I have and I know I excel at. There's certain skills I do and certain skills I don't, and that's okay. I'm very self-aware. But no, I think they do. I think it was the head of Mossad a few years ago wrote a whole article about why women make better spies than men because of exactly what you're saying. So I fully agree with that, which is why I do think in general, women, we have an easier time with them collecting intelligence because of the skills that are involved in that as a society, accepting that, versus at the FBI, knocking down doors and physical and all of that. So I think that might be where some of that comes from. But yes, the head of Mossad was talking about how, critical thinking skills, empathy, listening skills, all of those things that women have actually make them better at spotting, assessing, and developing and recruiting human assets, which is great.
We recently talked to Valerie Plame, and she said earlier this year in Foreign Policy, she mentioned in a book review that she was talking about what she calls a sort of a climate of suspicion and unhealthy competition amongst women in the CIA. And I wonder, having overlapped with her in the agency, I know that your experience was somewhat different, but what she described speaks to what seems like a symptom of a larger issue within the agency. Was that ever part of what you experienced?
So in the agency, no. In the FBI, yes. So at the FBI Academy at Quantico, there's 40 people in my class, 34 men and 6 women. I was used to not being, with a bunch of women. That was just typical in the jobs that I had. The people that were the cruelest to me during training, the people that are most awful, the people that bullied me the most were the women. Like, full stop. They were the most awful to me. The men, not all of them, but some of them were extremely kind. It was the women who were the most horrific. And what's interesting is now, even now that I'm not an FBI agent anymore, some female FBI agents, formers, retired, whatever, are still pretty awful to me or to others, not males. The males have been the kindest and have taken me under their wing, which is really interesting. So I feel, again, it's not to say Valerie didn't experience that. I'm sure she did, 1,000%. I just can only speak again from my experience. But at the FBI, it 1,000% existed there, which is really sad because we could have probably, based on our small numbers, still had strength together, which no.
Maybe we should go back to the FBI a little bit, because I know that played a real role in informing sort of what you did after that. Could you speak about that?
Yeah, sure. So I enjoyed the work that I did actually at the FBI. I worked counterintelligence, but I was at an RA, which is a smaller office. So I got to do a lot of different things, which was really fun, quite frankly. But it just got worse and worse kind of being a female there. And so I think I decided, I'm a strange person. I decided let's change this narrative, or try to change this gender narrative. And I had actually gone to college to be a high school history teacher. I mean, that was my dream, I guess, growing up. And so I figured then was a better time as any to become, a high school history teacher. But then I decided to create a course for girls on national security and foreign policy. And I realized, why don't we just start from the ground up instead of recruiting them into these agencies? Let's get them interested in these agencies at younger ages, which there's nothing wrong with that. I was never exposed to those careers growing up. So that's what I do. Or did.
And thinking about how else your career in these two different agencies affected the work that you do now, I noticed that you've used your Instagram to share tips for women to maintain their personal safety. And I'd love to hear you talk about how you're using what you learned in law enforcement and the CIA to teach other women about what they can do to protect themselves.
Well, so that grew out of frustration. So I feel like I said, I'm a Gen Xer. I did not grow up with technology and all the social media stuff, thank goodness, actually. But I realize that social media is here to stay, whether we like it or not. It's going to stay. So I can sit here and balk about it and be frustrated about it and refuse to use it like some people do. Or I can use it to get information, non-biased, correct information out to more people. And so that's why I decided making those. I break down foreign policy, I break down national security. But then someone sent me a video of a woman doing 20,000 things in her hotel room to barricade herself in there so that no one would come in. And that really frustrated me. Again, I'm not demeaning her, but she has no background in law enforcement or anything like that. And also that's a huge safety hazard. If there's a fire in your room, someone can't get you out. I mean, there's just so many problems with this, and we're instilling fear, right, in people. We're getting clicks based on fear, and that's kind of gross to me. And so I started just being here's 3 things that you can do that, 1, won't get you killed if there's a fire. And 2, are very simple and don't cost anything, because all of the things that they were wanting to get links and clicks from selling, some of the stuff that they were peddling. And I just thought that was really disingenuous. And so that's why I started doing what I'm doing, is just to make it really easy. I'm not looking to make any money. I don't make any money off of my Instagram or my TikTok. It's just about getting information out there.
You are, I don't know what the right word would be, democratizing force for information of this.
I'm trying to be.
But it wouldn't surprise me to, 20s, 30s, but even younger, if I had any degree of interest in the sorts of careers that you had. There aren't very many people who are willing to sort of, not just to put a face to the name and to these ideas and to this information, but to make the information so accessible and real, and there's no jargon.
That's what I try to do. I don't have a political agenda. Most people can't figure out. I don't talk politics. Like, I'll talk national security, obviously, and that sometimes that involves a president or a policy decision, but I never give my opinion. I'm just not interested in that. I just want to get information out there, and you know what? You make whatever decision it is that you feel like making with it.
What does all of your work have in common? You've done so many different things over the years, and you do a lot of different things now.
I think, and I always say this like to my own kid, it was always about like, what did you do to make the world a better place today? Like, did you pick up a piece of trash? It can be that small. And so I feel, although I know people hate the intelligence community or hate law enforcement, there's just so much noise out there. But I feel like I was helping make the world a better place. And by teaching, I feel like I'm helping make the world a better place. And by putting information out there, I'm hoping that it's helping people make better and more informed decisions. So maybe that's what it has in common. I don't know. Maybe I made the world a terrible place. I don't know.
It may be a terrible place, but I don't think it's Tracy Walder's fault.
Hey, who knows?
Your episode of True Spies ends with you talking about how being a teacher gave you the opportunity to empower women to pursue careers in intelligence. And I wonder if you ever feel ambivalent about inspiring them in that way, knowing that they will face discrimination and certain difficulties that young men aren't subjected to.
That's a good question. I don't, because not all of them are going to experience that, right? I have met former female FBI agents that had zero issues. I've met former CIA officers that have zero issues. Not all of them have experienced that, but I think everyone, no matter the job, has experienced something negative about that job. And to discourage someone to go into it just simply because they may experience this doesn't better the situation. At least in my opinion, it doesn't. But being vocal, enacting legislation, having congressional hearings about these things at least brings it to people's attention, and people's eyes are a little bit more open. I was very naive. I assumed the FBI would be exactly the same as the CIA. But hopefully in getting that out there, if women, apply for these jobs and go into these jobs, they at least know that the potential is there. Whether it happens to them or not, I don't know.
You note in the book that you grew up in a household with a bumper sticker on the refrigerator that said, "Stop bitching, start a revolution." And that's going to stick with me a long time.
It's my favorite bumper sticker in the whole wide world. Part of it's good, part of it's bad. Part of it is because my mom really just didn't want to hear any complaining, like full stop ever. But then I realized, and I think it's kind of the same way how I've approached everything. You can complain about it, and like, that's cool. I guess that's why I rage tweeted my senator, right? Like, I can sit here and complain and talk and talk and talk and talk and talk, but what's the point if it doesn't enact any kind of change? And you can do something small. It doesn't have to be huge, like getting congressional legislation, right? It starts as like very small things. But I think a lot of times in society, we hear people that just complain. Well, then do something about it.
Well, thank you. I've really learned a lot listening to you speak, and I'm so glad that you made time for us in what I know is a really, really busy schedule. So thank you.
Oh, yeah, no problem. Well, thanks for having me.
Thank you for tuning in for the debrief. We're so happy to have you along for the ride. We hope you enjoyed that conversation between our producer, Morgan Childs, and Tracy Walder. Disclaimer. The views expressed in this podcast are those of the subject. These stories are told from their perspective and their authenticity should be assessed on a case-by-case basis. If you're enjoying this podcast, please click now to give it a 5-star rating or leave a review. Ratings and reviews help people discover the podcast and help us bring you more great stories. And if you have some time, why not forward the podcast to a friend?
So on the morning of September 11th, as she sat at her desk with her coffee, her mind was back on those terrorist training camps, oblivious to what was unfolding in the world outside her office. And then things got worse. It wasn't just America under attack, it was the intelligence community itself.
So when the plane hit the Pentagon at that point, I believe really all federal buildings were evacuated. You know, our cell phones didn't work. Nothing was working. It was just a mess. I was not scared. I'm not a big panicker. So I think to be able to function at the agency and the type of work we were doing, you have to compartmentalize things. And I don't know if that's good or bad, but I think you have to, because if you let your emotions completely overcome you, you could make a very, very bad mistake that could have worldwide consequences.
True Spies, the classics, from SPYSCAPE Studios. Search for True Spies wherever you get your podcasts.